When Father Justin spoke last week about his dilemma between going to South Dakota and Assisi, Italy for a 30-day silent retreat, I was reminded of a very fitting story for today in these times of pandemic that we're living in. As many of you would remember, in the first half of the 20th century, it was polio that was actually the highly infectious disease that would suddenly show up during summertime and strike without warning. And just like the coronavirus, no one really knew what caused it. There were no known cures or vaccines at the time. To provide some facts, from 1951 to 1954, approximately 75,000 people in North America, mostly children under the age of 5, became paralytics due to polio, and another 8,000 died from the same disease. There was one young researcher named Jonas Salk who was determined to develop a vaccine for polio and bring an end to this crippling virus. So Salk committed himself to working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years on end to find the vaccine. But Salk eventually gave up. All of his efforts, he felt, were meeting a dead end, and so Salk was exhausted, and he decided to take a vacation. Now I'll ask you, where do you think Salk went on vacation? Do you think he went to South Dakota or Assisi, Italy? Well, Salk went to Assisi, Italy. And in particular, he stayed at the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, this magnificent 13th century basilica. Beautiful Gothic Romanesque architecture, these stunning fresco paintings from the 13th century, natural light pouring in from the windows. This setting changed Salk's future forever. Reflecting upon this time, Salk said this, and I'll quote it to you. The spirituality of the architecture there was so inspiring that I was able to do intuitive thinking far beyond any I had done in the past. Under the influence of that historic place, I intuitively designed the research that I felt would result in a vaccine for polio. I returned to my lab in Pittsburgh to validate my concepts and found they were correct. So as a direct result of Jonas Salk changing his environment, he was working in this cramped basement lab at the University of Pittsburgh for years on end. And then he finally went to this magnificent 13th century basilica in Assisi, Italy. As a direct result of changing his environment, Salk ended up discovering the vaccine for polio, and he's now regarded as one of the key scientists of the 20th century. Last week, Father Justin asked an important question. Do we know where the best place is for us to pray? And today, Jonas Salk helps us to answer that question in full. In particular, Salk shows us the importance of our environment. We know that our environment has a huge impact on the ways that we think and behave. See, often we can think that building better habits, like exercising every day or developing a habit of prayer, is all about willpower or motivation. But Salk helps us to realize that the number one driver of better habits and behavior is our environment. Now, the key to a good environment, one that helps us to foster those better habits, is by having an environment with a lot of positive cues and an environment that doesn't have any negative cues. Cues are simply things that we see or smell that trigger a behavior. I'll give you an example. Say that I'm staying here at St. Anthony of Padua in the rectory this weekend, and I've made a commitment that I want the habit of exercise every day at 4 p.m. So I walk into the rectory at 4 p.m., and there are 2 rooms that I can choose from. Okay, and room 1 is Solomon. Now, Solomon has the Canucks game on, a lazy boy chair, and he's got the rice cooker and a bucket of chicken wings ready to go. As a result of these 3 negative cues for exercise, if I walk into room 1, I am not exercising at 4 p.m. Okay, now you have room 2. Room 2 is Medard. Now Medard has a P90X3 workout video on that Father Justin just gave him. He's got my workout clothes and running shoes ready to go, and Medard actually wants to work out with me. Chances are, if I go into room 2 at 4 p.m., I will be working out. So we know this is so true for a habit like exercise. And it shows that our environment has a huge impact on the ways that we think and behave. So this is great news, because rather than just rely upon motivation or willpower, if we want to establish a habit like prayer, rather than rely upon those things, we can choose today to create an environment that actually fosters the behaviors that we want to take on. Now, how do we do this? We know it's by removing negative cues and adding in positive cues. Now, for the online community, we can start a discussion about what are the negative cues that you need to remove from your prayer spaces, from your oratories at home. And what are the positive cues that you need to add to those prayer spaces? I'll give you an example of some of the things that I do. When I go to my oratory at home, I turn off my TV, I put my iPhone on airplane mode, and some positive cues. I open up my Bible or grab my rosary. I look at some inspiring artwork. The Divine Mercy image and Rembrandt's Prodigal Son are 2 images I always go to. And sometimes I might listen to some sacred music, especially if there's noise in the background. In addition to these positive cues, the best positive cue of all for me that has been a game changer for my prayer life is Jesus in the Most Blessed Sacrament. That's why I love going to an adoration chapel, which is a great environment for prayer. And the adoration chapel here at St. Anthony of Padua is one of the best. When you walk in, your mind just focuses directly on the Most Blessed Sacrament. Everything there is intentionally built as a positive cue to draw your mind towards Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And you know, as you're there in prayer, that Jesus is with you at all times. And Jesus Christ is the most positive cue, and that's why he comes to us in the Most Blessed Sacrament. Here at St. Anthony of Padua, the parish vision starts out by saying, with the Eucharist at the center. And so we need to make every effort we can to live out that reality on a daily basis by coming to the adoration chapel here at St. Anthony of Padua. But if you're not able to make it on a daily basis, for whatever causes that might be, then you should find a way to live this out at your oratories at home. One way that you can do this is to print an image of the adoration chapel here at St. Anthony of Padua. You can print out this image online, or you could beg Father Justin to print out nice holy cards of this image and give them to you. And then when you go to your oratory, your prayer space at home, you can look at this image and then close your eyes. Visualize yourself coming to the adoration chapel here at St. Anthony of Padua, kneeling before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and make a prayer of spiritual communion. That can be a great way to begin your time of prayer. This is just another example of how adding these positive cues into our environment and removing negative cues, rather than rely upon motivation and willpower, which fluctuates. It's like a roller coaster. We don't have to rely upon that. We can create environments that help to foster better habits today. And believe it or not, today's gospel perfectly captures everything that I've been speaking about so far. Just as we heard Jonas Salk, he ended up discovering the vaccine for polio in a new environment. What happened today in today's gospel? Peter ended up discovering his vocation as first pope in a new environment. We know that Jesus is the best teacher of all. And good teachers know that our environment has a huge impact on the ways that we think and behave. And so when Jesus wants to deliver a lesson to us, he's going to create an environment that helps to foster what he wants to communicate to us. And so Jesus takes his disciples on a 40-kilometer journey. That's about a 2-day walk for a specific purpose. He brings them to a new environment, Caesarea Philippi. This was not a place they commonly went to, because this was pagan territory, and it was known for this famous pagan temple. It was built upon this huge rock. This rock is some 500 feet long, about 100 feet high. And at the time that Jesus is speaking to his disciples, there were probably pagan priests performing live sacrifices at this time, throwing these sacrifices into that dark pool area that you can see. That area was known as the gates of Hades. And they'd throw these sacrifices in there to try to appease the gods. So Jesus is the best teacher of all. He brings them to this environment for a specific purpose. In front of a false church, built upon a false rock, dedicated to a false god, offering false sacrifice, what does he do? He reveals to them the true church, now built upon the true rock, Peter, dedicated to the true God, Jesus Christ, in which the gates of Hades will not prevail. What a good teacher we have in our Lord. And as a sign of this new vocation that he's given to Peter, what does he give him? The keys of the kingdom of heaven. Now, at that time, the keys were given to the prime minister. Prime minister was second in command to the king in the Davidic kingdom. And one of the actual roles of these keys were to open and close the gates of the kingdom. And what do you have gates for? You have gates to keep out bad things and let in good things. If you want a visual of what it's like to add positive cues and remove negative cues, think about these keys. Christ is giving us authority to keep out the bad and let in the good, so that we can create environments that actually help to foster better prayer. In conclusion, we would all say that the best thing Jonas Salk could ever have done during the time of the polio epidemic was to go to that basilica. That was the best thing Jonas Salk could ever have done. The same is true for us today. During the time of the coronavirus pandemic, the best thing that we can do is to go to those good environments, those environments that help to foster prayer. That is our best response, because prayer will give us the divine strength that we need to persevere during these times. And by creating those good environments, we give ourselves that opportunity to really go deeper in prayer. And the deeper we go in prayer, the more divine strength that we will be given from our Lord, not only for ourselves, but for so many other people out there that are desperately in need of strength and good news. And that is what we are called to do. So we're thankful for Jonas Salk for going to that basilica in Assisi. And Jonas Salk, although he was correct in crediting the inspiring architecture as a key source of inspiration for finding the vaccine for polio, we know that that magnificent basilica was not built just to inspire people, but was a house of God. It was built for Jesus in the most blessed sacrament. The same Jesus that spoke these words to Peter is the same Jesus who gave himself to Peter in that new environment of the upper room on Holy Thursday at the first Mass. It's the same Jesus who comes to us who are so privileged today here at Mass to receive him in Holy Communion, because Jesus doesn't come to us in the Eucharist just to remain in a tabernacle. He comes to make a home in our hearts, to enter into our environments, and to make a permanent oratory in our hearts today.